The other way that we can create complex sounds to later filter for subtractive synthesis, or a way that we can add together multiple signals to create complex sounds beyond just the straight adding of sine waves, summing of sine waves outputs, is something called modulation, not frequency modulation specifically, but just signal modulation. And that's where we take typically two oscillators, and one of them multiplies the sum parameter of the other one. And there's generally two types of modulation that we're going to think about. Amplitude modulation, or AM modulation, and frequency modulation, or FM modulation. So let's look at some examples here. I'm going to pull up this program SuperCollider, which is a big, scary kind of program, but that's okay. And this first example I've got here, essentially going to plot something, but what I'm doing is I am taking, here, let's do this actually. We're going to copy this example here. And we're going to say plot 2 seconds of this. And I'm going to take out, I've got some control things here that I was going to do, but we don't need to see those for the moment. We'll do 4. And let's see if that gives me what I'm looking for. Great. Nope. Excuse me, I need to do away with that. All right. So now, and we'll listen to it here next. So I want you to listen to this amplitude modulation. Great. And you can see here on the plot that came up, it's creating these kind of lobes of sound. And so it's modulating the amplitude. And I know you can't read SuperCollider code because it's its whole thing right here, but essentially notice I've got a sine oscillator that I am multiplying by the output, thereby affecting the amplitude of another sine oscillator, a carrier oscillator. And what this does is this results in this kind of modulating signal where we can hear wah, 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 and it's affecting the amplitude output that we're experiencing. This next example is going to allow us to hear this a little bit more clearly. And what's happening is I'm setting the frequency of the modulating oscillator between 0.1 hertz, or 1/10 of a hertz, and 10,000 hertz. And then I'm also affecting how much of that signal is coming out between 0 and 1. And then we're going to multiply that by the output of our sine wave. And this is where this is going to get really exciting. But let me see. First off, I'm going to take my sound down all the way so that we don't hurt ourselves here. Because I believe my mouse is on the wrong screen, but that's okay. So you're going to want to notice these values right here. I'm going to stop this. These values right here, the one that says mouse X is showing what is the frequency essentially. And I think I actually could probably fix this. So we're going to say label. I believe I just want to say freak. Is that true? Nope. There we go. So freak, and then we will do the same thing where I'm pulling this and we're going to say label, and we're going to say that that is modulation amp, or the modulation amplitude. Great. So now modulation amplitude is how much am I multiplying the carrier signal by, and the frequency is what is that frequency. So anything below 20 hertz, whenever this value is less than 20, we should be able to hear these beating amplitude waves. And that's where I'm going to start. And what's going to be interesting is noticing when we go above 20 hertz, how it changes the sound. So let me bring my volume back up here to -4 or so. And I'll take my mouse over in the lower corner. And all we hear right now is a 1000 hertz signal. Great. I'm going to turn the volume down just a touch. I think it's a touch piercing. But notice, let's see, is that any better? Yeah, let's stick with that. Hopefully that's not too loud for you all. Okay. Whoa, I gave it away. So you can hear this modulation multiplying the signal such so that it goes soft, quiet, soft, quiet. And notice as I bring the frequency up, so now we're at 2 hertz or so. So twice per second, we're getting this amplitude modulation. And now about 4 times per second. So this is right around 20 hertz. Again, notice that below 20 hertz, you can clearly hear that amplitude coming up and down. What's going to happen is as I start to go above 20 hertz, your ears are going to perceive this as being a set of frequencies. Rather than one 1000 hertz signal, it's going to start to sound like a set of frequencies. And you're going to notice I'm going to pull up, I'm going to reload this frequency analyzer here so that it looks a little bit better. Show freak scope. Great. And what you're going to notice and you're going to see is that we're actually going to start to get a set of what's called sidebands. And these are going to show up as separate frequencies. So this is right at 20 hertz. Now your brain likely is starting to hear this as a set of frequencies and not a single frequency any longer. And we can start to really clearly hear it there, I think, around 60 hertz. Now notice the frequency scope, the frequency analyzer here, that at 325 hertz, we have these 2 bands on either side of 1000 hertz. Let me go back. Again, now we've just got the single band. And now I'm starting to get these side bands as I increase my frequency. And if I bring down the amount that I'm multiplying that amplitude by, those sidebands go down as well. And eventually, if I go so high in frequency, we start to get something called foldback and can create a kind of inharmonious set of frequencies. So that's, again, amplitude modulation, where we're multiplying the amplitude. The other one that we're going to talk about is frequency modulation. So in frequency modulation, I think I've got a plot example of that here, right here. So in frequency modulation, it's going to think through some numbers here for a second. I'm going to pull this over here and we're going to make it larger. Notice this is over the course of 2 seconds. So we have a frequency, and as I modulate that frequency, in this case by a 1 hertz signal, over the course of a second, our frequency changes from as fast as it can go to near 0. This is why we've got this gap here, and then fast, and then 0 again. Likewise, if I changed this to, let's say, 2, we see a similar-ish, but instead now we've got 2 times per second, or twice in the period, this modulation occurring. This is important. So let's listen to this example now. And I'm going to come over here to this one. Great. I'm going to move my mouse into the lower corner again. We're going to bring back up our... Yeah. Whoa, sorry. So you hear that our frequency is modulating in this case. It's being multiplied, so our frequency is actually going up. And then our frequency is going down. And depending on how much I multiply that by, affects how large those swings are. So let's do the same thing here. I'm going to make sure that we can track our frequency. So this is going to be our label. This is our modulator frequency. And this is going to be our mod amount. And we're not going to worry about this one right now. So let me put my mouse back over here. Great. So same thing, right at about 20 hertz. In this case, actually about 10. We start to hear multiple pitches in our brain. And we start to see those on the frequency analyzer. And if I lower my mod amount, those sidebands become less present. If I raise my mod amount, sidebands begin to dominate. Great. So that's a basic overview of AM and FM modulation. I have no idea how bad that video clipped sound-wise. I'm sorry if it did. But that hopefully will give you a basic idea again about the difference between those two types of ways of creating complex signals.